Hello everyone, you are welcome to the GMAT 41's mathematics class. In this video lesson, we are going to give attention to how to obtain the inverse of a function. In previous video lessons, I already explained the concept of functions and how to obtain the domain of a given function. So we are going to continue, alright, by looking at the inverse of a function. It is very important for us to understand that we need to know how to get the inverse of a function, because only then can we be able to determine the range of a given function. And of course, that is what this class is based on. I'm going to teach you how you can get the inverse of a function. Please, if you are yet to subscribe to my YouTube channel, consider doing so. Kindly subscribe. And also, for detailed learning, you can join the GMAT 41's community. Alright? Click the join button and then select whichever of the package of the level that is convenient for you. Now let us move on straight to what this video lesson is based on. Imagine that you are given y to be equal to f of x. Okay, a function is defined as this. Y depends on x. So y is the dependent variable, as we know already, and x is the independent variable. Please take note here that y there is the same as f of x altogether. Are you following, right? Now, if I ask you to find the inverse of this function, just take note of that word, inverse. I think generally, if I hear inverse, what will come to my mind is like the opposite. For example, if I give you 5 and I said you should find the inverse of 5, it is simply 1 over 5. And if you actually try to do one or two things about that, let us assume it's an equation. That 5 can go to one side of the equation and 1 can go to another side of the equation. So how do you apply that to the inverse of a function? First of all, you need to identify the variable that is subject of the formula there. And generally, the dependent variable is usually the subject of the formula from a given problem. So if the dependent variable, like in this case y now, is usually the subject of the formula, to get the inverse, it means that we need to make the independent variable the subject of the formula. Do you get that explanation? Once again, a function is given to you. The dependent variable is the subject of the formula, usually. So if I said y is the dependent variable, it means that y will be the subject of the formula. Now you have to make x subject of the formula in order to get the inverse of that function. So that's generally what the idea of inverse of a function is. Okay? Now, before we move on to solving problems on inverse of a function, I want to quickly tell you some secrets. These are basics that you need to know before moving on into it. Because here you're trying to make one thing subject of the formula in a given function, in an equation. You need good knowledge of change of subject of formula. And of course, when you are dealing with change of subject of formula, you need to have good knowledge also of the 3 basic principles of simple equation. When to collect like terms, when to cross multiply, when to divide both sides by the coefficient of the unknown. Please, dear friends, check the description box below this video lesson and you will see a link that will direct you to a lesson which you have to take in case you have challenges on the principles of simple equation, because you need that, being that will be applying that in this inverse of a function. So if you are given y to be equal to f of x, to get the inverse, all you now need to do is make x subject to the formula. It will now become equal to f of y. You see that, right? Now once you do this, quickly change x to y and y to x. Take note of this, I've said, very important. When you have made x subject to the formula, that is the independent variable, you make it subject to the formula, quickly change that independent variable to become the dependent variable. and then change the dependent variable to become the independent variable. As in this case, x is equal to f of y, which is the inverse of this guy now. So change this x to y, because in this case, x is now dependent on y. So change it to the independent variable, which is y in this case of the inverse. And change the independent variable, which in this case of the inverse is y. Change it to what? X. The reason why we do that is usually, most times when we are dealing with, two alphabets we use as variables, you would usually see y to be equal to something that contains x. Alright, having said this, once you do this, this inverse will now become f of x inverse. Okay, so this is the symbol for inverse of a given function. F, then something like power minus 1. And then that is going to become f of x. Remember I told you to change x to y and change y to what? X. And whenever you write f of x, f inverse of x, that whole term represents, y. But you are talking about the inverse of y now, which means that this you are saying is the same as y inverse, where it will now depend on the function that contains x. Do not forget the fact that you have to change x to y and y to x when you have done that change of subject of formula. It is now time for us to pick questions and solve to obtain the inverse of functions. Let's look at our first question. Given a function f such that r is mapped to r. This is read as a function such that real number is mapped to real number. As f of x equal to 7x plus 3. Then f of x inverse is, so we don't know what the inverse of this function f of x is going to be. We have the options provided. Of course, although we have options, but you cannot just jump and just take one answer. You have to solve, or likely look at it, do some mental works, and you get your answer. Let us see how we solve this problem quickly and then find out what the correct answer is. The function given to us from the question is f of x equal to 7x plus 3. This is a polynomial function. We are required to obtain f of x inverse, simply the inverse of this function, we don't know. And I explained already that to get the inverse of a function, simply make the independent variable subject of the formula. And the independent variable here is x. Because this f of x is y, and y depends on x here. So y is the subject of the formula, which depends on x. All we need to do is to make x subject of the formula. So this implies that y will be equal to, let me rewrite y to be 7x plus 3. Because f of x is y, like I explained already. Our aim is to make x subject of the formula. So what do we do here? To make x subject of the formula, we are going to move this plus 3 to the left-hand side. So we get y minus 3. Simply put, sometimes, subtract minus 3 from both sides of the equation. You have y minus 3, you have 7x plus 3 minus 3. So that plus 3 minus 3 will cancel out. But that's a waste of time, although simply move plus 3 to the left-hand side. And then we have y minus 3 equal to 7x. Remember, like I said, to learn more about the principles of simple equation, check the description box below this video lesson and you get the link to guide you there. Now to make x the subject of the formula, we are going to divide both sides by 7. If you divide here by 7, you'll be left with x. So let me write the x first. That will be equal to, divide y minus 3 by 7. If you divide y minus 3 by 7, you have y minus 3 over 7. I have made x the subject of the formula. So quickly, change your x to y, change y to x. Every other thing remains the same. Change x to y, change y to x. This you're saying is the inverse of this function. Therefore, I'm going to write f of x inverse will now be equal to come over here, x minus 3 all over 7. And of course, this is our answer. Coming back to our option, the correct answer is option C. Let us move on to our second question. Here comes our second question. If y equal to 2 squared x, 2x squared minus 10, find f of x inverse. So we are to obtain the inverse of this function. Once again, this function is a polynomial function. Let us solve and see whether we get the correct answer. We have the options here. Of course, if we solve and we do not have the correct answer here in the option, it means that we go for option E, nota. This nota means none of the above. But anyway, I don't know yet whether we'll have the answer there or not. We have to solve. This is mathematics. Alright, the function that was given to me is y equal to 2x squared, 2 squared x, mean the same thing, minus 10. Remember I explained that in obtaining the inverse of a function, simply make the independent variable subject of the formula. Here the independent variable once again is x. So I'm going to make x subject of the formula. And how do I go about this? Principle of simple equation will guide you. So let's look at it. Since I want this x to be subject to the formula, looking at this, we have two terms here, this and this. So first, I'll have to remove minus 10 from this right-hand side of the equation. So it's going to come to meet y here. And of course, if I'm doing that, I'll have y plus 10 equal to 2 squared x. Correct. We are targeting making x subject to the formula. It means that I have to remove this coefficient, this multiplier 2. I also need to remove this squared term. I have to remove it. But first, what you have to do is to remove this multiplier. Is that okay? You remove this multiplier 2. And to do that, I'll have to divide this right-hand side by 2 and divide here by 2. If I divide this 2x squared by 2, the 2 will cancel this coefficient to be left with what? X squared. Let me write that first. So we have squared x or x squared to be equal to, I'll come to y plus 10 and then divide by 2. Next, we are going to remove this square term, alright? We're going to remove the square. And to remove the square from this, we take square root of both sides. Taking square root of this x square, we'll be left with x. And that will be equal to, introduce our square root to y plus 10 over 2. At this point, remember, quickly change x to y and y to x. So that gives us y equal to x plus 10 all over 2. Square root x plus 10 over 2. This is our inverse now. Is that okay? And so I can just simply write f of x inverse is equal to square root x plus 10 over 2. That is the answer. But now let us look at the option, because this is the problem sometimes when you are taking CBT exam in a case where options are provided. Of course, you need to solve towards the option. It's not just all about where you want to stop. You need to solve to get at least one of the answers, or options rather, that the examiner provides. Square root x plus 10 over 2 is our answer. Look at option A, not it. Option B, not it. Option C, no. D, no. Does it mean that it's not a? No. I don't agree. We have to come down at this point first and check if we still need further simplification here, if necessary, to get any of this option. I know with this option, someone might be thinking that the correct answer is likely C. Are you sure? It wasn't a mistake I made here? No. I didn't make any mistake in providing option C. That is minus there. Our answer is plus. So we now have to move on to check further. Okay? You see, I'm trying to do this because when you are seated for an objective exam, close to the end of your solving, you want to be guided by the options provided. Is that okay? Very important. Alright, there is something I'm seeing with this option A. This is raised to the power half. Please take note that square root is also the same as raised to the power of half. If I give you square root of 4, it's the same as 4 raised to the power of 1/2. Good. So it means that in that x plus 10 over 2, I can remove this and then I'll write x plus 10 over 2 in brackets raised to the power 1 over 2. Then look at something. This is x plus 10 all over 2. Because of this plus, you can split the numerator over the denominator. What do I mean by that? Because this is plus. Even if it is minus, you do the same thing. You can break the numerator into the number of terms you have there. There are two terms here. So this is x over 2 plus 10 over 2. That 10 over 2 will give you 5. So we now have x over 2 plus 5. Which, of course, that's what I have in bracket here. And I think that's very clear that option A is the correct answer. Let me conclude. The inverse could still be written as x over 2 plus 5. And then everything raised to the power of 1/2. We are done solving this problem. You can go for the correct answer, which of course is option what? A. Alright, we are going to take ourselves to the next question. Let us see what we have there, okay? And solve. Get out the next question, we are waiting for it. Seems like this next question is something else. Let's see what we have, okay? Oh, so this is a question we've been waiting for. Maybe like trying to threaten us, right? But don't worry, this is 1 plus 1. Like I told you, the principle of simple equation will guide you whenever you are dealing with making something subject of the formula. If f of t is such that real number is mapped to real number, is defined as f of t equal to the cube root of 9 over 2t, or simply 9t over 2 minus 13. Evaluate f of t inverse, or f inverse of t. These are the options provided. Is it scary? There's nothing here in this question. Let's see how we play around it. Is that okay? So you would enjoy it. Let's look at the solution. The function given to us is this, f of t. So this is a function that depends on t, no longer on x. It doesn't matter, any alphabet can be used for you. So we have that f of t, can we just go straight on? F of t here represents y. Are you following, right? To represent y. So this is just like y is a function of t as given. F of t. So I'm going to have y is equal to, we are to make t the subject of the formula so as to get the inverse. So since t is in this term enclosed by these cube roots, we solve from outside. That's the whole idea in a situation where the function looks a bit complex. Solve from outside and then you're moving inside. It's just like when I had in the previous question 2x squared. We had to solve from outside, remove the coefficient 2 first before dealing with the square. So here we are going to remove the cube roots. And how do you remove cube root from a term? Simply take the cube of both sides. Cube root is also the same as raised to the power of 1 over 3. So if I take the cube of both sides, that is raising both sides of the equation to the power of 3, that 3 will cancel the over 3 power. Are you following? But like I said, simply take the cube of both sides. So this is going to be y cube equal to, that removes the cube root from this term. So we are left with 9 over 2t minus 13. This is cool. You know, at this point, we are trying to make t subject to the formula. Remember, like I said, solve from outside. It means that this minus 13, which is not part of this term, will be removed. We're going to take it to the left-hand side. That is one way you can approach this side, so that you have y cubed plus 13 equal to 9t over 2. There is still another way you may choose to handle this part. Instead of collecting this minus 13 to the left, you can decide to take LCM of the right-hand side. And I think for this question, I would like to do that. Just my choice. Like I said, you may choose to move minus 13 to the left first, and then you cross multiply. But I want to do LCM on the right, because we've not solved any problem using LCM pattern. So this is going to be y cubed equal to the LCM of these two terms. This is 90 over 2. This is minus 13 over 1. So the denominator 2 and 1, the LCM is 2. So if the LCM of this guy is 2, we're going to have 2, then all over. Of course, you know what to do. But the fastest way of handling the LCM of this term is simply 2 times minus 13. You have minus 26. So you have 90 minus 26. Everything will be all over the denominator 2. Since this is a whole number that you are subtracting from this fraction. Okay? Anyway, but let's move on. Normally, 2 over 2 will give you 1. 1 times 90 will give us 90. Our sign here is minus 2 over. There is invisible denominator 1 here. So 2 divided by that denominator 1 will give us 2. Times the numerator 13 is 26. Now, at this point, you know we're trying to make this subject to the formula, but this whole term is in fraction form now. We have to clear the fraction by removing these 2. Easily cross multiply, that's the point here. Or you can say multiply both sides of the equation by 2. If I multiply it by 2, I'll have 2y cubed. Multiply this whole term by 2. The 2 will cancel out, divide this denominator 2. But let's just use cross multiplication process. 2 times this will give us 2y cubed. And then there is no denominator here anymore. This is 90 minus 26. At this point, I will collect minus 26 to the left-hand side, and that becomes 2y cubed plus 26 equal to 90. Divide both sides by 9 to make t subject to the formula. We have t to be equal to 2y cubed plus 26 all over 9. This is the inverse of this given function. But of course, you know you have to change t to y and y to t. Okay, let me do that here. This is going to give us t will be changed to y, and then y to t. So look at it, y equal to 2t cubed plus 26 all over 9. So our inverse, f of x, okay, f of t inverse. It's not every time xx. So f of t inverse will now become 2t cubed plus 26 over 9. This is pretty good. But let's look at this and then check the options you have here. You'll notice that no particular option is exactly 2t cubed plus 26 over 9 written in that form. But I noticed that in each of the options, a term was, a number was factorized, which is 2 over 9. Okay, in D is 9 over 2. Well, doesn't matter. Let's check if we can do any factorization there. The denominator there is 9. So if they are pulling it out, you know for sure there is going to be something in the numerator over 9. Which means that this option D is not the answer at all because it's over 2 there. Look at the numerator. What is common to this? 2t cubed and 26. You notice that 2 is common to them. Please be careful. Not this 2. What I mean by 2 is common is you can use 2 to divide 2t cubed. It's a factor. 2 is a factor of 2t cubed. 2 is also a factor of 26 because 2 can divide 26 to give you 13. Therefore, since 2 is common to the numerator, we're going to have that f of t inverse will now be equal to pull out the common term in the numerator, which is 2, is going to be 2 over 9. Then since you factorize 2 from the numerator, of course, to get the term in the bracket is going to be 2t cubed divided by the 2 you factorized. The 2 will cancel this 2, you'll be left with t cubed. Then plus 26, you also factorize 2 from it. So you divide 26 by the 2 you factorized, you'll be left with 13. And of course, this becomes our answer. If you look at the option, you'll agree with me that the correct option here, 2 over 9 bracket t cubed plus 13. That is option E. So dear friends, this is how we obtain the inverse of a function. You see, it's actually a simple process. The only thing you need is good knowledge of how to make a variable subject to the formula. And like I said, a good knowledge of the principles of simple equation will guide you there. Do not forget, once you make the independent variable subject of the formula, what do you do next? Change the independent variable now to become the dependent variable, and then the dependent variable change it to become the independent variable. So if you are solving in terms of y and x, and you make x subject to the formula, to now be dependent on y. Do not forget to change that x back to y and then the y back to what? X. And then you get your inverse. When necessary, look at the option and find out whether further simplification is needed in the inverse you obtain so that you can simplify and get the correct option. Alright, in our next class, I'll be teaching you the range of a function, how to obtain it. You wouldn't want to miss that class. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video lesson on how to obtain the inverse of a function. Perhaps should we solve more questions? And now, you don't need much of that. If you understand these 3 questions solved already, you can be able to deal with the inverse of any given function. There are other important things to get from inverse of a function as well too. For example, knowing the inverse of a function, an examiner can ask you whether the original function is a one-to-one function or if it is an onto function or if it is a one-to-one and onto function. That is where we talk about the concept of bijective function, the concept of surjective function, the concept of injective function. Don't worry, I will tell you about those guys in subsequent class. Please like, subscribe to the GMAT 41 YouTube channel, share these video lessons to your friends, to your classmates, to other scholars so that they can also learn how to handle problems on inverse of a function. Do not forget, you can now join the GMAT 41's channel membership, okay? So as to get step-by-step drilling of these concepts, okay? We'd always bring you wonderful one from mathematics, physics, and chemistry. I'll be seeing you in our next class where I will teach you how to obtain the range of a function. But remember, that depends on inverse of a function. So make sure you take this video lesson again and again, understand how we handle the inverse of a function. So that in that class on range, we can be fast, okay? We'll be fast in handling that without wasting time. I'll be seeing you next week. Take note of that. Next week, where I'll be teaching you the range of a function.